So I wanted to be a scientist for a very long time, and here on the left you can see a very keen young woman at the top there, part of the public speaking team, and a very keen scientist there at my school. Doing well. I excelled at science at school. I was at an all-girls school run by former suffragettes, and I think the science teaching was variable. Some of it was very good, some of it was more mixed. Our physics teacher, I only realised after I left, only really understood heat. She didn't really understand much about electricity. Consequently, we went into the O-levels with a lot of knowledge about heat. And the kind of, you can see people, something to do with this. Did okay at that. And then went to a different school to do sciences at A-level. And this kind of happened at the next school. So sort of rapid change in presentation, largely associated with music and with young men with similar hair, I can't lie. So I was going to say, there were distractions on the horizon. I think that was particularly the one on the right, very distracting. And I got to my A-levels, and I did terribly in my A-levels. I know you're probably looking at that and thinking, great student. Actually, no, I was doing really badly. That's kind of written on my face. I do like the idea that this is the picture I wanted on my rail card. I took this along to Blackburn railway station. Oh yeah, print that up. I'd like a rail card, and I'd like it to be emotionally quite distressing. So I didn't do very well in my A-levels. I got my A-level results back, and it was a little bit, suddenly all the things you're planning to do aren't going to happen. I went to Germany, bold move for someone who doesn't speak German, and my mother applied through the clearing process for me to go to university, I think just so that she could get rid of me, just gone. And I'd done all right in biology. I hadn't done particularly well in the A-level, I'd got a D, but I'd managed to get S-level biology. This raised false hope in my parents, who went off and had all my A-levels remarked. No, they're the same. She just has bad A-levels and an S-level. However, good enough to get me into a biology course at Goldsmiths. And when I was at Goldsmiths, I didn't really know what was going on. It was a situation which I was failing badly because I didn't really understand. I was the first person from my family to go to university, and I did not know what was going on. So I didn't do very well there. But while I was there, we took a course in animal behaviour, and part of that was, the first essay that we wrote. I can remember thinking, this is amazing. You can study behaviour scientifically. What does this mean for humans if we can know all this about geese, And that was a real turning point for me. So I finished the year. I didn't do particularly well in my exams, as you might guess. And I went to work literally around the corner from here on Southampton Row, where there used to be a kilt shop. I was working in the basement of the kilt shop, here modelling a kilt. And I applied to Polytechnic to study psychology because I wanted to do psychology. I found out you could study this thing, and that's where I wanted to go. So if you ever really want to finally hone a mind into succeeding at academia, I would put that mind in the basement of a shop that sells kilts, managing and stock taking and organising kilts. Okay, that's good. One day I'm going to get out of here, and I'm going to study what I want to study. So I went to the Polytechnic of Central London, still taking very much the same approach to photos, as you can see. And then I applied for a PhD at UCL, and I got to be at UCL. And I, one way or the other, been to Cambridge, other places, but this has been my academic home ever since, for which I am eternally grateful. And things started to go better. I was liking psychology, I did well at psychology, I got onto a PhD, I loved doing the PhD. I've been in academia since then. So I think sometimes I think that starting with a really bad fail around 18, which had a tail for quite a while, it's not, I wouldn't recommend it. I can't say, do you know what, let me talk to your teenage children, because I think you'll be surprised at how well this will pan out. All you need to do is wait for about 35 years. It's just how my parents' perspective. I was like, why are you still... But I think it made me kind of aware of failure very young, and having failed badly once, and I'm not saying I never failed again after that, but it gave me, I was paying attention to it, I think it's probably the best way. And I was mortified. It took me years to ever really go back to or have anything to do with the people I was at school with, because I was just so embarrassed at having failed so publicly and so very badly. I thought I did well. I was good at science. I should have been the person excelling at this, and I wasn't. Of course, they could care less. They've got their own lives going on. They're not sitting around going, where's that failure Sophie Scott who thought she was so good at science and she's not? So often it's a personal thing, but that doesn't necessarily make it any much of an easier ride to make. finishing my time at UCL. I'm very pleased being, this is when we all got computers in our offices, like, yes, have a photograph of me with a computer. Going very well here. Right, so failing. Failing is hard. Failing is unpleasant. It's not nice. And one of the main reasons is you know you're failing and it feels awful. The brain systems that go, yay, this is a win, they do something else when you're failing, and it's a horrible feeling, and it can be enough to spiral you off into a very dark place. It's not good, and it feels bad. And that can make it hardest. You can be sort of mentally in the most difficult place to accept that this is not the end. It can be useful to fail. It can be extremely useful to fail. It means you did something. You did something at which you could fail, and you now have an opportunity to learn from this. This is something you can take something away from, and I'll come back to examples of that. Most importantly, you can try again, and you can fail better. This is also true of succeeding. The reason why we don't notice this about succeeding is succeeding feels fantastic. Woo! I won at this, I'm great at science or whatever. And it is as important to bear these things in mind when you succeed at something. Is there something you could learn from this? Is there something you could take away and still do differently? If something worked, why did it work? Can you apply that to other areas? Succeed again. Succeed better. These really, you should be, to everything I'm saying here about failure absolutely applies to success as well. One of the worst things that you can do is come out of a success and think, well, I'm now great at things, because that's not going to set you up for anything good. So failing is hard, but literally everything in life that is worth trying for has to be worth failing at. If it was something that you wanted enough that you wanted to try for it, then it's going to be something with the possibility of failure. Nothing that you'd really want to work, would seem like a great achievement, could be that without the possibility of failing at it. Otherwise, it would mean nothing. So, for example, in my experience, I have applied for 3 fellowships that I got, and I have applied for 3 fellowships that I didn't get. And it's horrible not getting the fellowships. It's awful. But the ones I got were brilliant, and they were really, really useful, and I had a fantastic career purely doing research for 16 years as a result of that. So the chutzpah to apply for fellowships contains within it the possibility of failure, but also, when it pans out, I've just realised it's 4. I've applied for 4 fellowships I didn't get, and 3 that I did get, and it was worth it. It was worth it. And you definitely won't get them if you don't apply. There's so many different things in life this is true of. I can remember a friend of mine saying that, one of the main differences between people who get Nature papers and people who don't is the people who send a paper to Nature in the first place. Because by definition, it doesn't guarantee it. You don't say, well, I've sent it, so, that should probably work out the way I want it to. But then you kind of have to think that a bit, otherwise you probably wouldn't do it in the first place. No one ever said this was going to be easy. We do not go into careers in academia and research because this is an easy life. I don't know if you've ever seen, there's an episode of The Simpsons where Krusty the Clown is bemoaning his lot. He's a television character who's sort of very foul-mouthed when he's not entertaining children. And he's complaining about how little he's paid. And he says, wherever I go, I see primary school teachers driving sports cars and research scientists drinking champagne. And what he means by that is, all these well-to-do research scientists and primary school teachers. And there's a reason we're being grouped with the primary school teachers in this comparison. We're not considered to be people who are doing this necessarily for the big riches. But that's also because there's many other advantages to our job. Our jobs are difficult. Our jobs take a lot of time and thought and effort, but also the rewards are amazing because we get to do jobs that are really personally satisfying and give us a lot of different kinds of intellectual freedoms. None of this comes without a cost, and the cost is that it's quite a difficult life anyway. Failure is built into a lot of what we want to do. You just have to embrace it and start to learn to deal with it. Something that I think is very true about, well, it's about our jobs, but it's about many jobs, and this is something that sounds so trite, but it's a bit like the applying to nature example. Doing things does lead to other things. So, sometimes doing things can lead to catastrophic failure, it goes wrong, but also sometimes doing something that seems quite minor at the time can lead to things that are really, really interesting and pay off you in very unexpected ways. And I'm going to give you an example of that, but it just means that it's worth thinking, if with an opportunity there or a possibility of something you might go for, what's the worst that can happen? If the worst that can happen is I don't get it or it doesn't work out, well, do you know what? Why not try it? Literally the worst way I could fail is for it not to pan out. There are many worse things in life. So let's give you some examples of reasons why I failed. I failed at my A-levels. I failed at 4 fellowship applications. I sometimes failed at things because I didn't care. I didn't care very much when I was 18. I was miserable. I like that boy on the right. I've failed at things because I didn't prepare for them. I failed quite a lot of what I did when I was at Goldsmiths because I had no real idea what was going on. And I didn't engage with what was happening at all. I failed because I haven't taken things seriously. I've been confronted with a situation where I really should knuckle down and do some preparation and think about what's going on there. And for whatever reason, I thought, I'm fine, I've done enough. And I haven't done enough. I failed because I thought I was good at something. I can think of an interview I went into thinking, do you know what, I'm great at this. And I was great at this. In that interview, I wasn't, and they hated me, and I didn't get it. Epically didn't get it. Even down to the level I got feedback they didn't like my shoes. I'll name names if you want to afterwards. But it was, but at the bottom line there, I thought I had that. I thought I'm good at this. And it made me not prepared, not engaged, not think about what was going on in the right way. I failed specifically because I haven't taken other people's advice. People have said, you really need to think about this. And I'm like, no, I know better than that. I know what I'm doing here. It hurt. I failed because I've misread situations. I literally went to a meeting yesterday where all the information I'd had in advance was, we're going to come in, talk to people applying for these grants. You're going to find information out from these different groups. Got there, it was basically an interview. And I was like, oh, balls, I'm giving a talk on failure tomorrow, and now I'm actually living this out because I have not prepared for an interview. I mean, they at no stage mentioned the interview, but I should have realised how likely is it they just want to take us around and see if we have any questions, you know. I failed because I had no idea what I was getting myself into. The scale of the complexity of what was going on, I was just something I had utterly I'd misread the situation catastrophically. In other words. And I failed because people didn't like me. The fellowship I was saying about where I was good at something and I thought that was enough. I did not land. I was not the right face. I was not the right person for that. And I can think of other jobs I've gone for where I was not the right fit for that. I was not the right person. Sometimes it's because you could do all the preparation in the world, you could have everything right, and you're still not the right person for that place, that time, that position. And often that's because someone else is better. So what you need to do when you're thinking about failure and when you have failed and you're thinking back on what's happened, run some of this through your mind. Could you have done any of this differently? Could you have taken it more seriously? Could you have prepared better? Could you have taken that advice? But also know what you need to worry about. Because there's a point when it stops being about you and there's stuff on there that you could never do anything about. Someone was better. They didn't like you. You weren't the right person at that time. All you can do is your best. So worry about the stuff you can manage and the stuff that you can't deal with, that never worry about the other candidates. There's nothing you can do about them. It's entirely possible one of them is better than you. It's not going to help you to worry about it. Worry about what you can change and change that. Work on that. So what other things can we take away from these kinds of situations? And by situations, I mean failure, but also success. So as I say, you can worry about what you can change, what you can deal with, what can you do. Dig where you stand. There are things in life you can't do anything about. There's other things you can change. It may not be easy, but you can start here. You can start now. You can do it. A lot of stuff's out of your hands. Some of it's systematic, some of it's personal, some of it you can worry about in other domains of life, like politics. But here now for that job, there's nothing you can worry about for that because it's gone. It's out of your hands. You can think about what you do differently, and I think it's really useful to think about that. If you can identify a point or a question you could have answered differently, preparation you could have done differently, it's worth thinking about that. What could you do better? What was good? What could there have been more of? What could you change? What could you tweak? So I always used to have a strategy of going into interviews where I would try to be positive. So if somebody asked a question where your immediate reaction would be, no, you couldn't do that. I would try not to say, no, you couldn't do that. I'd try and say, that's an interesting question, and this is a way that you could actually frame it. So you avoid saying to someone's face, no, you're wrong. Last The first really big failure I had at a fellowship interview, I got on a question to which I should just have said, no, I'm afraid that's an incorrect interpretation. What I mean is this. And I tried to apply my be positive rule, and it was wrong. So my be positive rule is not transferable across all situations, and that was not the only reason why the wheels came off that interview, but it was the start, it was the canary in the coal mine that was a suggestion that I was doing things wrong in that situation. It's worth practicing. It is worth trying things. So part of this is the doing stuff leads to stuff. But there are things like giving talks, where literally the only way to get better at doing them is to do them. Thinking about giving a talk will never make you good at doing talks. The only way to get good at doing talks is to do a lot of talks. This is the point where you're allowed to think, Sophie, you're not that good, so don't think you can tell me how to give talks. But it's true, it's simply doing it. And the same is true with interviews. It is really helpful to do mock interviews because it just gets you in the mood. It gives you, even if none of those questions get asked when you go to the real interview, it's got you sort of slightly more in the zone. You've practiced thinking about it. You've put yourself in that slightly stressful situation. Anxiety is useful. Anxiety is good. Don't worry about anxiety. Don't think you can somehow... There's no point in practice where you get to a point with talks or with interviews where it becomes not stressful. There's a reason why it's stressful. You should take it seriously. You should listen to that. But you can get more comfortable in it. You can feel more confident going in. And there's an element of making your own luck. So this, I think, all I really mean by this is to play to your strengths. So there are things that you do well, and you find in situations those don't hurt you. Build on them. Try them out. Do other things with them. I'll come back to this specifically, but my experience doing stand-up comedy meant that I have got slightly more comfortable using humour, even in situations where it wouldn't necessarily... I'm not doing a talk that's supposed to be funny. And it's a sort of thing you've got about you that you can use, say, if things go wrong. I once had to give a talk in Exeter, and as soon as I started giving my talk, everything, all the AV and everything just closed down. And in the end, I just had to close the computer and do an hour-long talk without any AV at all. And... 10 years ago, that would have finished me. I would have been done for. I would have been absolutely overwhelmed with anxiety. And having done some stand-up comedy, and the audience, you can see, getting increasingly stressed out by this. I'm not saying, well, I told a few jokes and it was hilarious, but it was just kind of more confident about it. And I could treat this as the ridiculous situation it is. It relaxes them, it relaxed me, and what was still probably a bit of a nightmare talk was slightly less stressful for everybody. Are you always crashing in the same car? This is a valuable question to ask yourself. If you come out of several interviews, say, if that's the thing that you're worrying about, and some question seems to have unravelled on you in the same way, it really is the time to start thinking about this. So apparently, the David Bowie song, Always Crashing on the Same Car, is quite a literal description of him driving his car around a car park trying to find a coke dealer. And he kept crashing the car. So if we can put that, again, to one side as an absolute analogy, but do I keep making the same mistakes? So if you go into interviews and everyone in the interview seems really rude, what's the common factor there? It's you. But that kind of thing is worth thinking about. Like, enough people have told me that I'm bossy, that I know, well, hang on, they can't all be wrong. Maybe I am bossy. And that's the thing to think about. And I'm quite careful not to let bossy Sophie out. For this reason, she really is too much. But that's, so if the same thinking, it's sometimes these questions, these things are hard to raise with yourself, and sometimes you can sort of see other people stuck in that rut. It doesn't have to be you. Change what you can, and if that is something that you can get on top of, because that sense of things always going wrong in the same way, it's unpleasant, it's going to lead to more failure, and you're not going to be able to get your way back out of it easily. This is a good rule by Sarah Millican. It's called the 11 o'clock rule, or Millican's law. So she's a very, very good comedian, very good stand-up comedian. She's actually quite an anxious person, and she gets very caught up and worried about things. So she employed this rule, which is an incredibly useful rule for failure. So this is for comedians, but it applies, I think, to any kind of failure. How to get over a bad gig, a bad show. Because one of the awful things about stand-up comedy is if it is not working, you know. I did a gig yesterday with a stand-up comedian, and the audience hated him. He came out and they immediately started heckling. They were absolutely horrible. It was a very stressful afternoon. I had quite a stressful day yesterday. I don't know if you're getting that. So how to deal with this? after my meeting I hadn't prepared for. So after a bad gig, she says, you've got until 11 o'clock the next day to feel genuinely upset about it. Think that was bad. Ooh, that's a bad feeling. And, kind of revel in it if you want to. Feel angry and upset about it. Think about things, brood on it. And after that, go. Draw a line under it, stop. If you must think about it at all, think about it productively in that way of like, what could I change, what could I do, what could be different. Don't just sit there going, do you know what, every single woman, particularly that Finnish woman, was a complete bastard. Because it's not going to help you. You're not going to move on from it. So you can have a proper old complaint about it and then walk away and think about the stuff you can do positively. Don't get upset anymore. Let that stay behind you, because otherwise you're just going to carry it into the next gig. You're going to turn up for the next gig thinking you can't do this. And that's going to guarantee that you can't do that. Importantly, she also points out you should do this also if you are fantastic and it goes brilliantly and you were the best. Enjoy that, love it, revel in it. 11 o'clock the next day, walk away. Think about the stuff you can do, things you can change, things differently. Don't continue thinking, I'm brilliant at this. Because again, going into the next thing thinking that will not necessarily work for you. So this is what I mean when I say most of what I'm saying about failure can be absolutely transferred to success. You need to take these lessons from success as well. So an example from stand-up comedy. So I got into UCL's Bright Club, which was these academic comedy nights. It still happens sporadically. And they started around 2008. And the first time I heard about them, I thought, have you lost your minds? Have you actually lost your actual minds? You're taking academics from UCL to a pub where people buy tickets to watch academics do comedy. I mean, B, I'm not doing that. I've worked really, really hard. I only got my chair in 2006. I've worked hard to get here. I'm not going to piss it all away in a pub full of strangers not laughing at me. I'm not doing that. So I was like, no way. And then now, the reason why I did my first gig in 2010 is that Bright Club was a success, and it grew very quickly. It was happening monthly. My postdoc did it in 2009, I think, and I went to see her, and she was fantastic. I was still thinking, no way, not for me. And then, at an event about public engagement, I met one of my, choose my words carefully, a male colleague, no longer at UCL, he's about my age. And he said, have you done Bright Club, Sophie? He said, I've done it. It was brilliant. I was really good. The audience loved me. I was hilarious. And I was thinking, you bastards. You absolute bastards. You've asked him, and it was brilliant. And he was fantastic. You haven't even asked me. I've been there going, don't want to do that. And you haven't even asked me. So I was like, I'll totally do that. And then the next thing you know, I was literally locked in a pub, in the toilets, going, I can just stay in here. People can slide food under the door. It'll be all right, But as soon as I did it, I did come out. And I went on the stage, and I did the gig, and my one conscious thought at the end was, I want to do that again, and I want to do that better. That was good. It could have been better. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I loved it for a couple of reasons. It's been a very interesting skill to learn. It was nice to learn to do something else in my 40s, but a time when you generally feel like most things are crystallised. And also, because it's a really interesting thing to do. I like being part of that world. So I've done quite a lot of gigs since then, and it's opened up a lot of doors. So I do the Infinite Monkey Cage quite regularly. I'm not the only person in the room who's done this. I've gone sort of beyond the straight down the line Bright Club gigs, so I do quite a variety of comedy gigs. And I've had fantastic gigs. I've had a brilliant time. It is one of the best feelings in the world when the audience are going, yay! And you're like, yeah, that's, dopamine, straight to my nucleus accumbens. Yes, that's the one. Keep going as long as you want to, guys. And I have absolutely died on my arse. And there is no way around it. If the audience are not laughing, that's it. It's happening then and there, in front of you. They are not laughing. They're going, for whatever reason, we don't like you. Just cannot wait for you to get off. This embarrassment. So here's an example of one of the reasons why that happened. So I bought this T-shirt in Las Vegas a few years ago. We'd done something at the Summer Science Exhibition, one that we'd been asking, teenagers, what makes you laugh? And they kept talking about the Big Bang Theory. And this is a T-shirt from the Big Bang Theory. I don't know if you can see it. So it says, I, atom, coitus. And I thought, whoa, that's one hilarious T-shirt. And one thing that I'd noticed, this was a number of years ago, that comedians quite often wore, hilarious T-shirts. I thought, get me some of that hilarious T-shirt action. And so I wore that to the next gig, and it was a disaster. Everyone backstage was just like, of course, and the audience were just like, oh. And there were at least two things going on there. First of all, it's very naff, The Big Bang Theory. And me going, hoo, 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 hilarious T-shirts. That's not enough. That's not going to work. That's quite naff. And also, I'm considerably older than most of the other comedians there. So I was not factoring in, it's like your mum turning up wearing a T-shirt saying, I had some coitus. So I thought, right. So I thought about this. And the gig itself wasn't a disaster, but I could tell the T-shirt was not landing. So there was an LGBT gig a couple of months later at UCL, and I thought, I'm going to make this T-shirt funny. This will be mine. So I wore the T-shirt to this lesbian, gay, trans, queer, bisexual night over at the Bloomsbury. And I came out, and I said, I'm sorry, I have to explain something about my T-shirt. I atom coitus. I said, I'm actually a cognitive neuroscientist, and actually they never let us atom anything, which was hilarious. They laughed. But from that point, it was just kind of acknowledging it and making it clear that I was, it was like I'd misunderstood it. That was fine. It was funny. So I've never worn it again since. I'm not going to make that mistake twice. Get out of that car. So, some examples of the sort. So what I mean by making your own luck. So I've had this experience doing Bright Club. I'm doing more comedy gigs. I got asked to do a TEDx talk in 2012 about my work on laughter, and I deliberately made it funny. It was a strategy, partly because talks on laughter that are not funny are horrendous. A couple of years later, I got asked to do a talk at the main TED conference. So big deal now, the big guns. Bill Gates is in the audience. I think they'd asked me because Jeff Bezos considers himself to have a hilarious laugh. Asked me about that afterwards. Strange. Anyway, so I'm there, and I was like, oh, what do you want? They were like, shut up, give us another talk on laughter. So I thought, right, I've got to nail this. They give you a lot of guidance, but this has got to be funny. This has got to be funny. There's still things I got wrong in it, but I really tried to step it up a king. So I made it funny, and it's been successful. It's worked a lot. It's been very good to me. Horizon, who'd been faffing around talking about making something about laughter for years, suddenly made an episode of Horizon about laughter with us. I got asked to do the Russell Band podcast because of that. And I know there are other Royal Institution Christmas lecturers in the room, so I'm not going to say I'm alone and very unique in this, but when I got asked to do the Royal Institution Christmas lectures in 2017, they hadn't even been in touch with me about it. They just took the TED Talk to the BBC and said, well, we're thinking of her. So, it's been very good to me. And all of that stems from doing the stand-up comedy in the first place. None of it would have happened without that. If I hadn't done the stand-up comedy, I would have never done any funny talks on laughter, even though I'd been doing perfectly reasonable good research on laughter. So failing is hard, but you failed. You're there. Well done. You're never going to fail if you don't try. You've tried at something. If you don't try, you are definitely not going to succeed. Learn from this. Take this with you. If you're learning from this, then you can start to fail well. And we should all be learning from failure all the time, as we should from success. Avoid crashing in the same car. You may fail differently next time. Learn from that. It's fine. There's been at least change. You're going to fail again. You're going to fail better. Thank you.